Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay, we want you to remember we are rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on tonight is COURDEA, which is formerly known as Minergy for those who know of the program, which is an intervention with people who have abused an intimate partner. We have with us our co-host this evening is Minister Ayanna Marks, and our guest is Noel Hopson, the Director of Clinical Programs for COURDEA. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or our co-host, you can email us at surfingandsilencedv@gmail.com. You can also text us at 437-778-3299. You can also call if you would like. And please also remember to like, share, and subscribe via whichever social media platform you're watching us through. With that, Ayanna, I will ask if you would go first and greeting our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Good evening, everyone. We have an amazing show for you guys. We hope that you guys take whatever you need. We hope we answer all your unanswered questions. We hope we give you guys clarity. We hope we give you guys a clear understanding upon different circumstances in life. And we just wish that you guys have an amazing show and an amazing viewers point.
Thank you so much, Ayanna. Noel, would you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers on tonight?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I am the Director of Clinical Programs at COURDEA. I've been working with the organization for about 10 years. I've been the clinical director for 5 years. In my position, I provide individual group supervision to the clinicians. I do a lot of the networking, partnerships, opportunities like this, education around our organization. And I also provide individual and group therapy. So that's like a summary of what my role is within the organization. And I'm looking forward to, being here tonight and having this discussion with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Noel. So as usual, we want to start with sharing some resources. And also, as usual, we are still raising funds for Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc., our nonprofit in which we support victims and survivors of domestic violence. The largest thing that we do is our emergency funding. We provide transitional resources, and we do so rapidly when we can. We provide monies for doctor visits, for transportation, food, clothing, school supplies. We help individuals with putting food on the table, with utilities. And actually, we've been able to move a couple people from one location, one state to another to get them into a safe space. But we do need financial help to keep doing this. So you can visit GoFundMe and look for our nonprofit again, which is Rise Out of the Ashes Inc. You can give that way, or you can write out a check to Rise Out of the Ashes Inc. We are at P.O. Box 15, Drexel Hill, PA 19026. And also, my book, Suffering in Silence, is available on Amazon, and we do use proceeds from my book to help us do what we do. So the first resource that I want to share is COURDEA, formerly known as Minergy. Their website is COURDEA.org, COURDEA.org. Their number is 215-242-2235. And you can email for more information at office@courdea.org. We have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their website is thehotline.org. Their number is 1-800-799-7233. And we want to share the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Their number is 800-656-4673. You can also chat online if you so choose to at online.rain.org. And their website is rain.org, RAINN.org. And then we have the Polaris Project, which is the National Human Trafficking Hotline in the United States. Their number is 888-373-7888. Or you can text the words "be free" to the number 233 733. And their website is polarisproject.org. And so with that, we move into our topic for this evening, again, which is COURDEA, formerly known as Minergy. It is a program that deals with intervention with people who have abused an intimate partner. And I think that the first thing that I want to say before we really delve into it and I turn this over to Noel, I do want to mention this is the first time that we covered this topic. We've been doing this program for 4 years now. This is the first time that we've looked at the other side because that is not what I do. That's not my lane. It's a trigger for me. It has been and still is. But I have a relationship with Noel. We both serve on the Interfaith Domestic Abuse Coalition of Montgomery County, and we did an event last year. IDEC put on an event that was geared towards bringing domestic abuse awareness to faith communities. And Noel and myself were both speakers at this event. And so I shared from the perspective as a survivor and as a minister, as an advocate. And she shared on behalf of COURDEA. And she did not know this, but when she began to speak, my whole body was tense because I was just waiting to hear something that was just off. But she did not do that. She presented the organization not as an end-all be-all, we have the 100% answer that's going to do away with domestic violence. She shared what the program is, what the program does. And what I really, really appreciated was the insight on behalf of the victim and survivor. So we truly are here tonight covering this topic because of Noel, because of how she does her job, because of how she represents the organization, because I have seen individuals be hurt because they were convinced that there was an answer that a program had, and if they could convince their abuser or perpetrator to go through this program, they would be okay. And they ended up either being killed or being continually hurt. And so that was always my fear. That was my trepidation. That's why I always stayed away from it. But again, so Noel, I'm thankful to you for being here, and I'm thankful for the ease that you were able to bring to me to get to this point. So before I ask my first question of you, I do want to say I want to advise against any victim, any survivor, or anyone else for that matter, thinking that you can encourage or force a perpetrator or an abuser to go through a program like this or any other program that you think might be helpful. You can't force anybody to do that. You cannot. And I want to advise against anyone believing that if a perpetrator does go through a program like this or any other, that is going to solve all the issues of abuse and everything is going to be fine. So I want to throw that out there because in what we do, we have to be careful about what we say, how we say it, how we represent information, and we don't want to lead anybody falsely in a way that would continue to get them hurt or get them hurt seriously in some kind of way. Mm-hmm. So I want to throw that out there. And with that, Noel, I would ask you to please tell us about COURDEA. Tell us what it is and why it was created.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tia. You know, I was listening to what you were sharing, and I really appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that. In my position, I am so sensitive about showing up in spaces that are for survivors because as someone who works with a person who's causing harm, it can be easily like misconstrued that I'm representing that body or representing that demographic. And like I've mentioned before, you know, as the director and someone who works really closely with the clinicians in this organization, we really emphasize that our goal is to create safer families and as much as possible to reduce the harm, change the behaviors that's happening. And And our efforts are very similar to advocacy efforts. And in survivor spaces, we don't want to take up more space than advocacy representatives. And also being mindful of triggering people with what we're discussing. So I am very sensitive to that. And I'm grateful to hear that the way that I spoke in the past was something that resonated with you and not in a way that felt triggering. Um, so a little bit about our organization. We are a treatment intervention program for people who cause harm, specifically in intimate partner violence. So we do work with men and women. Originally, our program was primarily for men, but over the years, we have expanded our program and our curriculum to be able to work with men and women. And really, it's more about awareness for women when it comes to getting referrals to our program. So depending on how many women we have in our program at any given time, we may not have enough for one of our treatment groups, but we are open to working with all people on acknowledging and being held accountable for the harm that they've caused in their relationships. Um, so our organization has been around for about 40 years, and it really came out of efforts of supporting advocacy organizations, which you were naming at the beginning of the program, that trying to raise resources to remove partners from homes where harm is happening. It it can be expensive. It can take time for those resources to be accumulated and for the removal to happen in a safe way. And so programs like ours were started out of recognizing that being able to reduce the harm in the household can also be a resource for people who are experiencing harm. So that's how we think about ourselves. We are a behavioral treatment program. And so, to what you were naming, we are very sensitive in making contact with partners as soon as possible in the process when someone is being referred to our program to be able to set realistic expectations, right? We're not able to change an entire individual, but what we can do is help them identify their patterns of harm and over time with education and tools, ideally help them reduce the amount, the frequency, the intensity of the harm that's happening. Um, but that also takes a lot of willingness on the person who's coming to the program. We are an accountability based program. So they have to be ready to be held accountable. The criteria for someone who has come to our program and is getting started in the evaluation process, if they're moving through and being allowed into our treatment group, they have to be able to express empathy for the behaviors that they have caused and acknowledge the impact on the people that they have hurt, partners, children, relatives. They have to be able to acknowledge and take responsibility for these behaviors. And again, like I said, be able to be held accountable for the ways that they have impacted the people that they have harmed. And all of those components are necessary in order for someone to be able to transition through our program. So we do reserve the right to discharge someone where we don't see that happening, because what we don't want and what you were naming is to give false hope, right? That in situations like this is dangerous. So very early on, what we're trying to do is make sure that partners are aware, if they're invested in the outcome of, I am trying to understand what to do with my relationship, that they should be seeing changes to behavior pretty early on into someone engaging in our program. And if they're not, then that's information for them, right? Like, how successful will someone be at the end of treatment, or a couple months into the program. If there's no changes or visible changes happening pretty early on into that process, we don't want to give a false impression that more time is what's needed to make someone better.
Mm-hmm. And so you thank you so much for everything you just said. But you talked about being referred into the program. Does that work in an instance of counselors referring patients to you, or does the program being court mandated, does that come into play, or can someone just call you up and say, hey, I want to be a part of the program? How do the referrals work?
That's a great question. So all of the above. So we accept court mandated referrals. We kind of, internally break it into what we call like soft mandates or hard mandates. So a soft mandate would be a counselor, a partner, a faith community. There's no maybe legal involvement in what we would consider a soft mandate. Um, and then hard mandates, we have a contract with DHS, the Pennsylvania State Parole Board, the Domestic Violence Diversion Program in Philadelphia. And then we also receive referrals through custody cases, family court. So those would be considered our hard mandate. So we receive referrals from anyone who is needing our services.
Mm-hmm.
What we do require as a first point of accountability in our referral process is that that person make the first point of contact. And so that is different from other programs where you may be able to submit a referral, and then that just gets the process started. What we do require is that regardless of how the person is coming to us, they are picking up the phone, they are making that first phone call, not a partner, not a counselor, not an attorney, because that first phone call, that first point of contact is the first step in the accountability process.
Okay. And so I want to ask you this, and then Ayanna, I'll go to you for a question. But the hard mandates, when it's court order, what I thought of was anger management. And so is it clearly understood that COURDEA is not anger management, or is anger management a part of it? Because we know that domestic violence has nothing to do with anger. Domestic violence is about power, and it's about control. So if it's court mandated, is there a clear distinction between an anger management program and dealing with domestic violence?
Absolutely. So we do get that sometimes. I think, if you're doing a Google search, our program may come up if you're looking for an anger management program. But part of our intake and evaluation process is to assess if someone is appropriate for our program. And so while we incorporate anger management strategies into our psychoeducation, we are not an anger management program. And so if someone does not specifically have a history of intimate partner violence, they're actually not appropriate for our program. And so that is part of what our evaluation process is designed to assess and determine if someone is appropriate for our program.
Okay, thank you. Ayanna?
I just have one question that came to mind for right now. You mentioned accountability a lot. And I was wondering, like, what is your advice for, like, young men or young women who, it's a hard time for them to take accountability, like, of their actions and stuff? Like, what advice would you give them, or words of encouragement you would give them so they can take the next step to, take accountability for their actions?
In the sense of, like, coming to our program, or just in general?
Coming to the program.
I would say my advice would be to think about the people that you're impacting, right? And so coming to an accountability-based program, that's a big part of what we're encouraging you to do, because accountability is being able to reflect on how your actions have consequences and results, right? And so that is what I would say. Like, think about the people that you care about and how your behaviors are impacting them.
Okay.
So, Noel, you said that in the beginning, the goal of the program was to create safe spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that goal is accomplished, if a safe space is created, how then do you maintain it?
It, like, outside of the program, after the program?
So yeah, so is it like, do you reach that goal and then COURDEA steps out of it, like where our job is complete, or is there a follow-up plan? Like, or is that something that you guys feel is your responsibility, or like how do you maintain when you get to where you desire to be with creating that safe space? Because it may not last.
Mm-hmm.
That whatever this perpetrator has learned, whatever decisions that the victim or survivor has come to, maybe I feel like, okay, I can stay here. I see some evidence, but that's the then and there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about a few days later, a few weeks after, a couple months after? Like, do you have a follow-up plan?
Mm-hmm. So not specifically a follow-up plan, but we do make our program as accessible as possible. So some of what I was thinking about when you were asking about, like, right, what happens after someone is completed or considered to be successfully completed the program. I think that's where, like, systemically resources come into play, because we offer individual therapy post completion of the treatment group. We offer people the ability to stay in our beginner level treatment group as long as they wish, post whatever mandate they've completed. We also have an advanced group, that if someone is demonstrating a desire to continue to do the work, but at a deeper level and really understanding their why and where they learned these patterns of harm. That is what our advanced group is designed for. I would say the biggest factor that gets in the way for clients in continuing to access those resources are finances, even though we do try to make our program as accessible as possible. What I have noticed is that in situations where, depending on the subsidies that someone has, right, just the financial resources that someone has with the appropriate amount of motivation and willingness, just getting through the completion portion of our program isn't enough. They are interested in continuing to do either individual or group work because they're recognizing this program is helping me have healthier relationships. I can see the changes in my home. And I also recognize that having this group as an accountability space is a big part of that. And I'm not ready to leave the group yet. So we leave that as an option, and we encourage our clients to make use of our program as long as they can. I know we have individuals in our advanced group when we do our weekly check-ins and they're saying, like, what week this is for them. They're counting week 100 plus of being in the program. So there are there are ways that someone can continue post a mandate, but like I said, that's where the resources come into play with each individual.
So, is one of the resources accepted by COURDEA? Is it health insurance? Does that come into play at all?
So we don't accept health insurance, but we have a sliding scale. And with the different contracts that we have, we are able to offer very reduced rates for someone who lives in Philadelphia. If they have a child in the home under the age of 18, we can offer very subsidized rates for the services.
Okay. So I'll ask you this, and then Ayanna, I'll go to you for any questions or comments you might have. I want to ask you about the dynamics of the program, how that works. You talked about group sessions earlier, and you also mentioned individual sessions. So is everything in person, and also how do you operate in the virtual world, if at all? So what do the dynamics look like for someone going through the program?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are actually fully virtual. And so that has been a decision, with COVID and switching to being a virtual program. Part of what we realized in terms of accessibility was that our program is more accessible as a virtual program. It reduces transportation costs, or, just being able to consistently attend sessions. You remove a lot of the barriers to that when someone is able to log on from a phone or a laptop. Um, so the way that our program is designed, when someone comes in, you start off with individual sessions, and that's our evaluation process. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the evaluation process is designed to assess someone's appropriate for our program, their level of readiness and motivation to do the work in our program. And so we have a number of tools to assess that. One of the first things we have a client do in coming into our program is a partner role play. And so what that is, we ask them to respond to a series of questions outlining behaviors that have been, like, harmful behaviors that may have been displayed in the relationship, but they are responding as if they are their partner. And so for most of our clients, this is the first time that they've ever had to literally put themselves in their partner's shoes and try to think about, how does my partner experience me? And for the clinician, what that can start to do is help us gain insight into their self-awareness, their honesty, right? Their ability to be open with us and actually acknowledge the harm that has happened in the relationship, and start to assess, are they capable of being empathetic towards their partner? And so after the role play, that usually takes place in the first session, we ask our clients to fill out a pretty extensive background history form. And so in that, what we're trying to get a sense of is family of origin, dynamics, another extensive list of harmful behaviors, some general information about relationships. Because what we're starting to do is create a conceptualization of, who is this person, right? Where did they possibly start to learn to act out in these ways, to give them that understanding of themselves, right? That this is a choice. This is learned behavior. Where did you learn this behavior? And again, trying to assess the willingness and readiness to take responsibility for behaviors that they have done in their relationship. And so in the evaluation process, we are also contacting the partner. That was something that we mentioned earlier. And what we're doing is we are asking the partner that same list of behaviors that we've asked in the partner role play. So in an ideal situation, we have a client responding as their partner, and then the partner's responses to the same list of behaviors. So we can kind of side by side compare and get a general sense of, what does this relationship look like? what are the patterns of harm that we're trying to address and change in this particular individual. And so throughout that process, if we are feeling like this person's appropriate for the program, they're ready to take accountability for their behaviors, they can acknowledge the impact of their behaviors, they would transition into our treatment group. And so the treatment group is 2 hours a week. It's a minimum of 10 weeks. I say minimum because one aspect of being a virtual program and making it more accessible, showing up is not the same as participating. And so we do not count participation if someone is just logged on and not actively reporting behaviors week to week, engaging in offering feedback to other members or being receptive when members of the group are giving them feedback on things that they are reporting. Our group is also psychoeducational, so we have a curriculum of exercises around the cycle of abuse, really detailing like what is abuse, helping them understand and increase their emotional awareness, and introducing regulation tools and strategies to help interrupt that cycle of abuse, you know, in those moments of building tension before it gets to an explosion, right? We're trying to interrupt that pattern and bring that awareness for the individual.
So thank you so much, because I was going to ask you how you were able to assess accountability virtually, because it's very different than being in person. I mean, even when I counsel individuals or speak to individuals, it's very different. You know the maturity of the person that you're dealing with. There are some individuals I can speak to you by phone. There are some, yeah, we can do this virtually, but there are some individuals, no, we need to be face to face. I need to see you, the body language, your interaction, so it can be completely different. So thank you for answering that before I asked. So
I have a little piece to offer that, like specifically for the accountability part. We have a weekly reporting form that we require clients to fill out. And so that is tracking week to week any abuses from the previous week, any near misses, drugs and alcohol, a high, an emotional high, an emotional low, and then the state that they're in about being in the group that night. So that is our weekly check-in. That is like the beginning of the accountability process each week in the group. And so what we are doing, and also encouraging clients to be able to reflect on, is week to week, are you having a change in your behaviors? You know, the number of abuses that you're reporting versus near misses, how is that measuring out, right? Ideally, what we would see is a decrease in abuses and an increase in near miss, right? A near miss is when someone is recognizing they are feeling activated, but being able to implement tools and strategies to have a different response.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Ayanna, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, what advice or strategies do you guys give, like, the families of the person who is, like, going through the process?
So we usually connect them with advocacy organizations. And so in that partner call, part of what we're doing is not only getting information about what the relationship looks like, we're setting those realistic expectations around recognizing that what we're doing is changing the behavior and not the person. And we're also giving them numbers to Women Against Abuse and other organizations within, you know, the Philadelphia area, surrounding areas, to connect them with advocacy support.
Okay.
So, Noel, I want to, if we could go back to the time frame. You talked about individuals going through the program, and when they finish, you know, maybe they want to stay on and add some more time. But what is the initial time frame like? Is there a minimum amount of sessions that a person goes through? Is it a minimum amount of weeks before you see any type of improvement or change? Like, what is the bare minimum that you see that you have to make that first decision on if this person can continue?
I would say the bare minimum is 3 weeks. So that would be in our evaluation process. And it is really rare that someone is coming through the program and only doing 3 weeks. That would be um, when that has happened, it has usually been because someone has been incorrectly referred to our program. And we usually see this with women, and they are actually a survivor and have found themselves being referred to us because of how the arresting officer responded or the charges that they were receiving. But that is the minimum amount of time that someone would come through our program. And like I said, that normally is reserved for when we're recognizing you're actually not appropriate for our program. You're more appropriate for survivor services.
Okay.
And we do see that every so often. If someone, well, let me say this, we really try to tailor someone's time in our program based on what they're presenting to us. So understanding that most people are coming to our program because someone else is requiring them to come to our program, the levels of resistance that we encounter in the evaluation process vary. And so someone may be able to go through the evaluation in 4 weeks, right? That's one session for the role play, two-ish for the background history form, and then one for group preparation. They're transitioning into the group. That's a minimum of 10 weeks. Someone may come through our program and their evaluation could last 3 months because what we see is that they are open, they are wanting to change, but they have resistance. And maybe that resistance is because of their own trauma that they've experienced, systemic trauma or childhood trauma that is coming up in the evaluation process. And so we're wanting to give time to work through that in the individual therapeutic space so that by the time they get to the group, that's not getting in the way of them being able to engage actively in the accountability process.
Okay. So still thinking of the victims and the families. At the very onset of the program, is it made entirely clear to those involved that this is not a program to fix abusers, and then everything is going to be fine, and what was initially found to be an abusive relationship? Like, is it made clear that this is not what this is, and this person whom you love, who you may love very much, may go through this program and you may not see the desired intent that you want? How does that conversation go, and do you have the conversation, and if so, how does it go?
Absolutely. So in that partner contact, like I said, we try to do that within the first couple of sessions as much as possible. And it looks pretty similar to what you were saying, right? What we're saying is when someone is coming to us with the, appropriate amount of willingness and motivation to change, we can help them make those changes more quickly and effectively. And if they're not, we don't want you to hold on to hope that this program can change this individual if what you're not seeing is some change in either language, awareness, pretty quickly into them being in the program. And so that is a significant part of that partner role play, partner interview that we do in the evaluation process. And we do require within the intake portion of the program, someone has to sign a release for us to contact a present or former partner in order to move through and have a scheduled session.
Okay. And so as you were talking, I was thinking, how do you handle, I understand verbal abuse. I understand emotional abuse. I understand keeping track of those things. There were more or less incidences, or there were more times that I was able to recognize it and I didn't go into it. But what about the physical abuse? And we do know that if emotional and verbal abuse is not checked, it will lead, all types of abuse, if not checked and stopped, will lead into physical abuse. Mm-hmm. But for those clients that you have where physical abuse is already the case, I'm just wondering, like, how do you deal with an individual who, this person is physically abusive, and it's like you're waiting for them to report how many times this week they were physically abusive. So it's like, what about the person who was abused? Like, at what point do you say, no, we need to intervene in a different way? We need to call the police. We need to do something. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I think some of what we do in that initial partner contact, we leave that door open for them to contact us if something happens that they want to report to us. If they are having concerns or hesitations that maybe their partner is not being honest in the program and what they're experiencing versus what we may be seeing are two different things. And so, we always emphasize that anytime we're in contact with a partner, it's strictly confidential. We won't use that information and say, hey, we learned this from your partner. But then again, that helps us assess, is someone actually appropriate for our program? So if someone is consistently lying about the behaviors that they're doing at home and then coming to our program and saying that they're not being abusive in the past 7 days, they're not appropriate for our program for safety reasons. And we are communicating that concern to the partner. We absolutely encourage partners to contact the police if that is what's happening. And that is why we try to connect them with advocacy support very early on, so they're getting resources and support as their partner is working on changing their behaviors. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you, what does success of the program look like when the program has been completed? If it's 3 months, however many months, like at the end of it, what does success look like for the perpetrator who has gone through the program? And what does success look like for his or her family? Is it more than just there aren't any more episodes?
I would say ideally, yes. So success, in my opinion, would look like a family where the partner could start to talk about what their experience has been, right? Without fear of retaliation. It would look like repair work happening for the harm that has happened. So I don't think success is just stopping the behaviors, but it is the person who's caused the harm being aware of the impact and recognizing, I now need to repair this. And that looks like more than just stopping the harm that's happening, but actively trying to make space for my partner to share what their experience has been like and me not act out. It makes room for my children to be able to talk about, how they've been afraid of me and me not act out, right? I think that that's what success would look like. Someone being able to recognize and actively work towards making a healthier environment all around in the home, and not just through stopping the behaviors, but more apologies and not the empty promises, but the changed behavior that looks like yeah, now communication looks different. The way that the household is flowing looks different because we're not walking on eggshells and, trying to avoid the next blow up.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I want to ask you this, and then Ayanna, I'll go to you for a question. The name change from Minergy to COURDEA, is there meaning some kind of way behind COURDEA? And I know that's not like a major question, but
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, so Minergy sounds like it's only for men, and so like I said, once we started shifting our program to be more inclusive, we didn't want the name to continue to reflect a program that looked like it was only for men. COURDEA came from Courage Dear. And so just a, creative way of blending those two. I think the whole phrase is like courage, dear heart. And so recognizing that it takes a lot of courage to change. It takes a lot of courage to be held accountable. And I think it even takes a lot of courage to do this work, right? Like
Yes.
working with people who cause harm is very nuanced, and it can be difficult to sit with someone and try to navigate those therapeutic spaces with them. And so I think that I wasn't the one who created the name, but that is my understanding of how the name change came about.
Awesome. Thank you. So Ayanna, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have two small questions. The first question is, what made the program go from, strictly catered to men to both men and women?
Well, that's a great question. Really recognizing that everyone has the capacity to harm, right? It's not just men who cause harm in relationships, that women can also act out patterns of power and control in relationships.
Okay, and my next question is, how do you keep yourself like motivated or like encouraged in working in an environment like this? Because sometimes it can bring a person down. It can confuse a person. So how do you keep yourself encouraged?
That's a big one. I will say, because I can actually see the impact of the program on the individuals, that is part of what keeps me motivated. I do believe in the work that we do, and I have seen the impact, and similar to what we described to partners, for a lot of the people who are coming to us, we're offering them language and ways of seeing themselves that they've never had access to before. And so for some people, it can actually be very humbling, right? And it can create room for, wow, I really want to do better. And those people, when they start to implement the tools that we've given them, you can hear and witness in session how it is creating healthier environments. And we do have contact with partners. We encourage partners to, like I said, reach out to us and share their experience of their partner. And so that keeps me motivated. In addition to, I really like our team. I think we have a really good team of clinicians. And I feel really passionately about healthy relationships. As a Black woman, so many women like me, women in my family, have been impacted by harm. And so I care a lot about the importance of this work.
Well, Noel, I thank you so much. We're just under the hour. What I want to do is ask you to, I want to ask you for your final words, but I'm going to ask you if you would give final words to victims and survivors, but also to those who may be perpetrators. Because in essence, you kind of see both sides of the coin. And so I would ask you, knowing what you do at COURDEA, seeing the difference that your program has been able to make, I would ask you to leave us with words on both sides tonight.
I think the first thing that's coming to mind when you say that is just reach out, right? Like relationships can be difficult and resources are available. And what I would want is for someone to feel like they have the capacity to change, that this is a space that is interested in working with them to help them make those changes. And for their partners, what I would want is for them to also similarly reach out for resources for themselves. Because what we say to, anyone who's coming through our program, like if safety is not able to happen in the relationship, then we don't want that relationship to stay together. Like we want a, a healthy and safe uncoupling, if that is the best solution for someone coming into our program, as difficult as that may be. But I think with the appropriate amount of support, right, like those dynamics can just be easier to navigate. So, yeah, I would say just reach out.
Thank you so much. So, Ayanna, do you have a final word for us on tonight?
I say just, don't be afraid of change.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to, reach out for help. Don't be afraid to, recommend a person for help. Just don't be afraid of change, because change might be the best thing that can happen for generations going on generations. You don't want to pass on something for generations going on generations, and then it becomes, a generational curse. If you're the person that can break it right now, then, don't be afraid to change. Break it right now. And like, we see you individually. Like, if you're going through it or if you're the perpetrator, we see you individually. We want you to know, like, don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid to put your best foot forward and think about the people around you. Think about who you're impacting. Think about, your children. Think about your family. Just take accountability for it and don't be afraid to change.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ayanna. So, and Noel, before we go, if there are organizations interested in having you or another representative from COURDEA to come and just to present information to bring awareness, is that possible? Can you just share information on that for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to do that would be to reach out to me via email or the office at COURDEA.org. That's a much shorter email address, but you could also reach out to me. My email is my full name, Noel Hopson at COURDEA.org. And so I'm more than happy to be in partnership with someone or talk more about how I could assist an organization with education on working with people who harm.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as we close tonight, Noel, I want to thank you again. I want to thank you for the part that you unknowingly played and getting me to this point. I appreciate the way that you represented your organization, COURDEA, and the work that you do. I appreciate the way that victims and survivors are thought of and incorporated into your work. I've never said that perpetrators should just be completely forgotten about or, just thrown under the jail and just forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know, and I am honest with, I'm not the one to provide the assistance and help on that side.
Mm-hmm.
So I thank you for doing what you do. Again, Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence TV. Again, please also remember to like, share, and subscribe via whichever social media platform you are watching. And before we go, Love Bay, I want to remind you to go to Love Bay, the website, and donate Love Bay is in a process of raising funds for their youth scholarship. So please visit Love Bay and donate for the Youth Scholarship Fund. We thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay, we want you to remember that we're rising out of the ashes together. Good evening.